On January 20th, 2026, if you were an Apple user, your digital world probably just went silent. And while everyone was understandably freaking out that their favorite shows weren't loading, they were missing the real story. See, this wasn't just some server taking a nap. This was a sign of something much, much bigger.
And that just nails it, doesn't it? What felt like a simple, frustrating little glitch on your screen was actually a systemic failure of a digital world we've all come to believe is basically bulletproof. So how did the walls of that famous garden start to crumble? Okay, let's get into it.
Okay, first things first, let's really set the scene here. We need to talk about what it actually felt like for millions of people when everything just stopped. Picture this. It's Tuesday, about 6:45 p.m. on the U.S. East Coast. People are finishing up dinner, finally settling onto the couch to stream a show, maybe put on some music. And then, nothing. For over 4 hours, right smack in the middle of prime time, a digital blackout zone just completely wiped out the evening for millions.
So, just how widespread was this thing? Well, this one number, it says everything you need to know. 29. That's how many separate, distinct Apple services all went down at the exact same time. And what's really wild is how it all fell apart. I mean, this was like a systemic, multi-organ failure. It wasn't just the obvious stuff like Apple TV and music. Critical infrastructure, like the App Store itself, went dark. And then you get to what we're calling the weird stuff. Things you'd never even think about, like Maps traffic data and your photos syncing. Poof, gone.
So, okay, the services were down. Annoying, but it happens, right? Well, the problem is the failure didn't stop there. The next layer of this whole mess was the huge, infuriating gap between what was really happening and what Apple was telling everybody. And this quote just captures the problem perfectly. Apple's official system status page, it's what's known as a trailing indicator. Basically, by the time it finally turns red, the entire internet has already been screaming about the problem for an hour. It creates this ghost outage. It's where what you're experiencing and what Apple says is happening are two totally different things. And this chart shows it perfectly. Just look at that huge spike in red. That's thousands of people reporting problems on sites like Down Detector. And meanwhile, Apple's official status is just green, green, green. That massive space between the lines, that's the gaslighting gap. It's that moment where you're left wondering, wait, is it just me? Is my internet broken? And this is the message that fuels all that confusion. It's so vague, and that's on purpose. Unable to play. Try again later. That implies the problem is on your end, right? A little glitch. But it's not. It's a total server meltdown in Cupertino. It's a design choice that shifts the blame, and that's what turns annoyance into real anger, because millions of people are rebooting their routers for a problem that was never theirs to fix. Okay, so we've talked about the users, but now we need to go deeper. Because while everyone was frustrated with their TV shows, something way more serious was happening behind the scenes. A full-blown crisis for the developers who actually build everything on Apple's platform. This is the story you didn't see trending. So you have to ask, right? While we couldn't watch our shows, what was actually happening back in the engine room? It's a really important question because usually when the stuff we see on the front end goes down, it's a huge red flag that the foundational tools on the back end are in even worse trouble. And yep, they absolutely were. The whole pipeline developers use to make and update apps, frozen solid. We're talking Xcode Cloud, App Store Connect, all of it completely offline. Think about what that means. If a developer discovered a massive security hole in their app, they couldn't do anything about it. They were totally powerless to push a fix. The entire ecosystem was just paralyzed. All right, now let's go to the deepest level of this failure, because this is where it all comes together to expose a fundamental crack in Apple's entire model. And this quote, it just says it all. You can climb over the walled garden, but you are still standing on their dirt. It's a perfect metaphor, right? It gets to the heart of this illusion of choice we have in Apple's world. You might think you've found a way out, but then you look down and realize the very ground you're standing on is still owned by the same landlord. And here's the absolute proof. You know those third-party app stores they have in the EU now? The ones that are supposed to be independent? They went down too. Why? Because to verify an app, to make sure it's safe, they still have to ping Apple servers for notarization. The wall might have a few doors now, but the foundation it's built on, that's still solid Apple concrete. And this dependency problem, it gets even scarier when you bring AI into the picture. A lot of Apple's new on-device AI features, well, They're not really just on the device. They rely on a hybrid system called private cloud compute. And when that connection gets cut, your super powerful $1,000 smartphone instantly becomes a dumb terminal. The hardware in your hand gets a lobotomy because a server thousands of miles away went offline. So after all this, what's the big lesson here? What should we really take away from this whole digital collapse? Well, it all boils down to this huge trade-off that we're all making every single day. And this says it all. We've traded the real ownership and control you get with physical media for the incredible convenience of streaming. But what this blackout was a brutal reminder that the play button isn't a promise. It's just a permission slip. And on January 20th, there was nobody around to sign it. So what happens next? Well, you're probably going to see a real shift in how people behave. We're going to see the rise of the digital prepper. No, not people building bunkers, people buying terabyte hard drives to reclaim actual ownership of their media libraries, making sure their access isn't dependent on some corporation's server status. And because of that, resilience is becoming a premium feature. There's going to be a growing demand for local-first software, apps and services that work perfectly without needing to constantly call home to a server. Offline capability, that's the new luxury. Look, in the end, Apple will fix its servers. They'll issue some vague technical statement, but trust? That takes a lot longer to repair. The real lesson of the blackout isn't just about better server maintenance. It's about questioning a future where everything we think we own, from our movies to the intelligence in our phones, can be switched off by a single point of failure.